Hello everyone. Before we start, I have some sad news to share. This was supposed to be a happy time. I wanted to celebrate and thank you all for helping me to reach 100 subscribers, but that now feels kinda hollow. We have lost one of our own from the community. Yesterday I found out that a fellow War Thunder YouTuber named 2N900 committed suicide after posting his last video. He was one of my favorite YouTubers, and I had been subscribed to him for about a year. He was one of my inspirations actually for me to start my own channel. I just wanted to say, please do not seek permanent solutions to temporary problems. Please get help if you need it. Now for the feature. I want to take a moment to frame this problem for you. A couple months ago, I made a video called Space Climber Denied. It was a short video, only 1 minute long, and in that video I did just that. I shot down a bomber at 30,000 feet that was dragging out the game. He was the only player left and people on my team were becoming agitated, and honestly so was I. I wanted to do this response video to the original Space Climber because I've had dozens of comments and thousands of views on it. Many of the people that watched had differing opinions. Some, for example, asked, well, what is a bomber to do? Just die? It got me thinking deeper about the issue. So with that question in mind, I concluded that it's not really the player's fault. As it is, bomber content has not advanced at the same developmental pace as everything else. We're all just participants in the ecosystem Gaijin created. The bomber problem in the game is a problem of Gaijin's making, although not deliberately so. The band-aid approach Gaijin has taken got us here. Here being a place where all players are frustrated because there are no obvious solutions to what a surviving bomber in a match should do. Try to survive and avoid paying what is often crippling repair costs, or just die in order not to drag out the match time. I mean, we all want to win, so most people will go with their own self-interest. Now, there will be many opinions on this, but I think we have to go back to the point when mostly we just had World War II bombers in the game to understand the madness we are currently looking at. The saying, the bomber will always get through, was very much applicable for the World War II era bombers. Those bombers were powerful enough to defend themselves from most early World War II fighter aircraft. Due to that power dynamic, Gaijin raised the repair costs, raised BRs, nerfed SL income and other aspects of bombers in an attempt to balance them out. They also stopped putting new bombers in the game, but kept adding more and more fighter aircraft. The power dynamic changed and many players abandoned bombers. At this point, it seems Gaijin's kinda lost interest in developing bomber content further. Player interest wasn't there, so development dollars went elsewhere. So let's fast forward to today. The last jet bomber added to the game was the Yak-28B at BR 9.3, and it was pretty lackluster to say the least. It was nearly dead on arrival. Ask yourself why. Why is it that we have new fighters nearly every patch but hardly any bombers? It is because of the implementation of bombers in War Thunder. They've fallen behind in 3 key areas: tactics, mechanics, and weapons. I feel that lack of vision in these areas has eroded player interest. So let's talk tactics. Precision daylight bombing without escort as a concept was debunked in World War II. Losses were becoming unacceptable due to enemy intercept. American heavy bombers needed fighter escort to continue to targets in Europe, and they got them in the form of P-47s and P-51s. By the Cold War, bombers were not capable of conducting precision daylight bombing over well-defended targets without significant support. For example, B-52s over North Vietnam needed self-protection jammers, suppression of enemy air defense aircraft to accompany them, and fighter escort to successfully ingress to the target area and then egress. No bomber would ever consider flying into a squadron of enemy aircraft or into an integrated air defense system hoping to bomb a target. At a minimum, local air superiority would be needed for the vulnerability period of the bomber. So if you fast forward in time a little more, and the advancement of search radar systems and radar-guided surface-to-air missiles pushed bombers to go lower and be faster. High-altitude, high-penetration concepts like the XB-70 Valkyrie and the B-1A, were no longer considered viable, so tactics were developed and requirements were written into new designs to push bombers to low-level, high-speed penetration, often with some kind of terrain-following radar to assist with all-weather and nighttime situations. But even being at low level is not a panacea. Mobile SAM systems in AAA are still quite dangerous to even modern bombers attempting to deliver their payloads. The need for standoff weapons was quite clear. Standoff weapons would allow bombers to launch outside of the WES of enemy integrated air defense systems, and also they could launch their weapons outside of the intercept range of enemy aircraft. So you can see where this is going, right? Eventually stealth bombers like the B-2 were developed to further reduce the risk of bombers trying to deliver various types of payloads. It turned out that sometimes even standoff weapons were not appropriate to service every kind of target. Bombers sometimes still needed to get real close in and personal to drop some ordnance so they could have the desired effect on a specific target. So let's talk about weapons. Bombers have a multitude of weapons to pick from dumb gravity bombs to cruise missiles, laser and GPS guided munitions to standoff weapons like the AGM-154, JSOW, or otherwise known as the Joint Standoff Weapon. You can also consider speed as a weapon system. For example, bombers like the Tu-22M Backfire, the Tu-160 Blackjack, and the B-1B Lancer, and even the FB-111, which is now retired, are significantly faster than, say, a B-52 or an Avro Vulcan, or even a Tu-95 Bear. Cruise missile launching B-1s and backfires could be very difficult to deal with if allowed to reach their launch windows. So before I get into mechanics, I want to briefly talk about defensive systems as well. Integrated defensive systems are critical to the life expectancy of a bomber. Being able to jam search and targeting radars enhance the survivability of the aircraft employing them. So delaying the adversary a targeting solution can be the difference between the crew surviving or being killed in action. So I want to talk about mechanics for a minute. Eventually, for heavy modern strategic bombers to be viable in this game, and I assume that would be Gaijin's goal, to eventually add modern strategic bombers, but they're going to need many things. Principally, they need an ecosystem in which they can thrive. Frankly, they're going to need to be compelling to play while still being balanced. Gaijin gets some credit here for the work that's already apparent in the game. We have ECM in the game in the form of jammers. We have flares and chaff already. We have infrared suppressors on helicopters, laser warning receivers. We have radar warning receivers. Missile approach warning systems are in the game on some helicopters. The Vitibisk defense system is in the game. It's been implemented on the Ka-52. You can check out my video on it. I'll put a link in the description. We also have some initial standoff weapons like the AGM-65 Maverick, which has a whopping 23 kilometer range. There's a KH-29L that has a 10 kilometer range. We also have aircraft radars. There's bombing computers, and we have with the Red Skies patch, SAMs, kind of an integrated air defense system around airfields in the game. All these mechanics combined could be adapted to specifically suit modern bomber avionics requirements and gameplay. The premise here is we already have some of the mechanics needed for bomber lethality, realism, and survivability in the game, such as standoff weapons, electronic defensive systems, and offensive systems. In short, an ecosystem to exist within is here already. It just needs refinement. So in closing here, this wasn't a bash Gaijin session. I'm just providing constructive criticism and acknowledging reality. Few players use heavy bombers seriously in air realistic battles or even arcade battles for that matter, because they're just not compelling to play. Killing enemy aircraft is the fastest way to win matches, not bombing targets. But it doesn't have to be that way. Sure, bombers have a fan base, but it's drastically smaller than that of fighters and fighter bombers. Gaijin is missing out on an aspect of air battles that I think could be transformational for the game. Imagine how things could be. We could have modern bombers in the game providing hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of additional content. Modern bombers could never work in this game unless Gaijin addressed some or all of the issues I just outlined. New game modes would need to be created to enable the tactics, mechanics, and weapons I previously discussed. I have some ideas, but at this point, I don't think they would gain any traction based on Gaijin's priorities and the aviation part of the game right now. I mean, they're really just focused on adding more modern fighters, which, I love. More modern fighters is great. But so until Gaijin figures this out, what they want to do with the direction of the game on the air side of things, this is what I'll be doing.